And many companies, when a known lead that's sitting in your CRM that maybe has converted on an ebook or a webinar in the past revisits a website and hits a strategically important page, literally alarm bells go off with the sales team. Slack messages, emails, text messages, and especially when it's a named account or a nearly perfect match on your ideal client profile. For those that are very high fit but not yet showing signs of interest, email still is a really important way of nurturing leads. But it's important to remember that the customer is now in control. Your prospects will call the shots for when and how they interact with your sales team. And hello and welcome. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and I'm thrilled to have you joining us today for 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads. If you currently have a lot of leads and sales opportunities and various degrees of prospects sitting in your CRM, and you'd like to accelerate more of them over the finish line to closed won with big capital WON, you are absolutely positively in the right place. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and I help companies in and around the data center better differentiate, get found much earlier on in the buyer's journey, achieve trusted advisor status, and close sales faster without compromising on price to drive more sustainable, profitable revenue growth. You may have seen me speaking at some of the industry's most popular conferences, and I've served in leadership roles in a number of related organizations and channel partner programs over the years. Bring more than 20 years of experience in and around managed services and infrastructure, especially in and around co-location, construction, cooling, cybersecurity, decommissioning, recycling, asset disposition, dozens of different software companies and SaaS companies, and in and around the telecommunications space. DCSMI is all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. Whenever I am planning a webinar like this, I want to make sure that we focus on what's most important to you. So with that in mind, we always ask when people are registering for this kind of webinar, what is your biggest sales and marketing challenge? And as you can see up there on the screen, see the top answers in descending order of popularity, both in terms of the actual challenges as well as in the word cloud. And you can see in the word cloud, clients and getting clients pops right out, but also very close to the top of that list are things like lead generation, getting customers aware of your products that are available, attracting data center clients, finding the right contact. That's the one that keeps coming up over and over again. So we'll be getting to those as well during today's webinar. If you have any individual questions that you'd like to submit for consideration to be addressed during the informal Q&A section of today's webinar at the end of immediately following today's webinar, you can feel free to include those in the question and answer panel and in the comments, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. So what is on the agenda for today when it comes to 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads? First up, we're going to talk about how to provide an excellent prospect experience while prioritizing your growth goals. Then we'll move into how you can better segment and personalize your overall approach based on the actions that your prospects are taking with your company. Next, we'll move on to how to use marketing and sales automation to deliver timely educational resources that help position you and your team to be seen as the go-to subject matter experts in your space. Then we'll give a brief overview of some sales productivity tools that eliminate some of the most common friction points that can get in the way of your sales productivity and in the way of sales closing faster. And then as we head down the finish line, we'll talk about how to build a full funnel webinar and events program that educates and builds trust at scale. And then immediately following today's webinar, I'll host a Q&A session, question and answer session, both with the questions that were sent in ahead of time, as well as any questions that are positively upvoted and seem especially relevant that are raised in the chat pane or in the comments. So first up, just to level set, when we consider what is going on in the data center industry right now, there is enormous amounts of opportunity, record-setting growth, especially in the semiconductor space and especially with NVIDIA leading the charge on anything and everything having to do with generative AI and high-performance computing and NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang is predicting that there's going to be $1 trillion spent on data center upgrades over the next 4 years, starting with the hyperscalers and trickling down to pretty much most of the industry. Michael Dell is predicting along the same lines, good friend of Jensen Huang, that there's going to be a 100-fold increase in data center demand over the next 10 years. That's the great news. Dell and NVIDIA are leading the charge on all of this, and there's plenty of opportunities for thousands of companies in the space to rising tide lifts all ships, right? However, here's the big however. There's been a lot of changes in buyer preferences in recent years, and these opportunities may not be distributed as evenly as you might like. Why? Because the way that people research and make purchase decisions has changed so much. As you can see up there on the screen, 83% of a typical buyer's journey, researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens before someone is willing to talk with someone from your sales team. 83% of all of their exploratory and research process and figuring things out is happening before you're invited into the room, either virtually or physically, to earn a seat at their side of the table. This is a huge change from as recently as 10 years ago when that number was at about 56%. So as recently as 10 years ago, you and your sales team used to be involved in about half of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing. Now it's down to a very, very small sliver, not much time at all. And these aren't just the edge cases. McKinsey found that nearly all buyers, 70 to 80% of buyers, have these same preferences. LinkedIn's discovered the way to, as you might surmise, the way to cut through all of this and earn a seat early and often with the right people in the right places at the right time in that first 83% of the journey comes down to having great educational content. So how do we, and great educational experiences, so you're seen as a teacher, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, a thought leader. So it's really important that we figure out a way to not just have a relationship with our future clients in the decision stage of the buyer's journey, but throughout the full buyer's journey, during awareness, when they know they have a goal or a challenge that they're trying to figure out, in consideration when they're weighing the different options that are in front of them, and at the decision point when they're finally ready for a sales conversation. Now, a very important thing to think about as well is that most of the industry researchers have found about 24 or so touch points that need to happen between complete stranger and buying decision. And if you want to close sales faster, it's really important to figure out a way for you to have an active role in as many of those 28 decision points, 28 touch points as possible. Many companies in the data center industry invest very aggressively in having a presence at major conferences, at major trade shows, doing a ton of great field marketing. And it's awesome. But the reality is each of those really only counts for one touch point. So if you spend a huge sum of money bringing 5 or 10 people from your company to a major conference, and you have this amazing booth and this great swag, and you sponsor this great cocktail party the second night of the conference, all of that is awesome, but there's still 27 more touch points to cover. How are you going to cover those if you want to close more sales faster? It comes down to contextualizing and prioritization. In order to do this the right way, first, we need to make sure that our company is product market fit, that we know exactly who our ideal clients are, what products and services they purchase, at what price points, and how often they're buying these products and services. We also need to be very aware of the journey that people go on, the stages of the journey, the life cycle, and the deal stages. And sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but they really mean quite different things. Life cycle stages are typically used internally among marketing teams, sales teams, customer success, account management teams. And they're a very company-centric way to figure out where someone is in their relationship with you. So if you've ever heard people talking internally about leads, marketing qualified, sales accepted or sales qualified, opportunities, customers, these are life cycle stages. And life cycle stages definitely have a relationship with buyer's journey stages. Buyer's journey stages are very focused, are outward focused. It's how your prospects and your future customers perceive what they're doing. Life cycle stages are how you perceive what you're doing internally. So how do they match up? Typically, a subscriber or lead is in awareness. At the consideration stage, they're marketing qualified or sales qualified. And at the decision stage, when they typically are interacting with someone from your sales team, they're at opportunity or customer. Now, if you've heard me talk about similar kinds of topics before, you know that I'm a huge proponent of saying that marketing teams need to be prepared to go much deeper into the buyer's journey than they've ever done in the past in their careers. And conversely, sales teams need to come in much earlier as well. And the difference is, though, is when you're coming in as early as possible, sales development, sales enablement, account executives should be working with your marketing team so you're all showing up as teachers and trusted advisors and subject matter experts and earning a seat at the table in that first 83% of the buyer's journey, when you have an opportunity to really sway the decision that they use to evaluate, the criteria that they use to evaluate all of the different options. Deal stage is another type of measurement that often shows up in CRM, customer relationship management systems, as a more precise or granular way of figuring out where someone is within the opportunity stage. And deal stages typically need to be verifiable, inspectable, so that when a sales director, VP of sales, chief revenue officer, or someone like that is looking through the deals board, looking through the pipeline, they can really understand what's truly going on and take as much subjectivity out of the equation. Another key thing to think about when it comes to closing sales faster is the marketing to sales handoff and what I call the 4 quadrants. How does this work? Well, your company needs to have a ton of clarity about how and when leads are passed from marketing to sales and under what conditions. In a perfect world, you will get a 10 out of 10 in both fit and interest. What does fit mean? This is the criteria that you use to decide that someone's qualified. What does interest mean? This is how interested they are in spending time with someone from your sales team. So in a perfect world, your sales team would spend 100% of their time engaging with leads that are showing very high signs of interest, very high signs of intent in purchasing your product or service very soon, and are a nearly perfect match against your ideal client profile, or their company is on a defined target account list, an account-based marketing type of list. However, that doesn't always happen. And as you can see in the 4 quadrants that are there, that would be in the upper right-hand quadrant, where you have both high fit and high interest, and that's where you hand off for immediate sales contact. At the other end of the spectrum, you could have both low interest and low fit, and that's where you provide group resources. This is what you're attending today, is the ultimate in group resources: webinars, ebooks, videos, podcasts. If someone is showing low interest, but they're a very strong fit, they get nurtured until there's stronger signs of fit. And if they're relatively low fit but high interest, then your sales team turns into order taker mode, or if you have self-service or product-led growth, that may be a better fit. In terms of segmenting and personalizing based on prospect actions, that would be the next play I'd encourage you to think about if you want to close sales faster with your leads. To segment and personalize and get that right, we want to be thinking about providing a world-class customer experience, CX, or a prospect experience. In order to do that, you need to figure out a way to segment and personalize at scale, because people's expectations are so different today than they were as recently as 5 or 10 years ago. Think about the experience that someone gets when they go to buy something on Amazon, not Amazon Web Services, but actually go to buy like a book or a home appliance or a TV or laptop or a phone or something like that on Amazon. How ridiculously personalized the experience is. That's what they're coming into these expectations with. So good segmentation and understanding starts with understanding who your personas are, the journey stages that they go through, and being cognizant that revenue growth today, scalable, predictable revenue growth today, and revenue acceleration depends on you and your company having a strong point of differentiation, using thought leadership as a competitive positioning tool, as an asset that helps you be available 7/24, 365, because you never know when your prospects are doing their research and accelerating them. Many times you'd be shocked at how it's 2:00 in the morning, their local time, or 2:00 on a holiday weekend or something like that, when your sales team would be nowhere to be found. And when you do that the right way, you can get dramatic sales acceleration, and this can lead to great high quality revenue growth. But we need to be really prepared and understanding that in a digitally transformed world, your marketing needs to be an important strategic part of all this to help your company compete on a global playing field, dealing with hyper competition, addressing commoditization and technology driven disruption. In order for your segmentation to be effective, you should be looking to segment around 3 major variables: who the person is, their buyer persona, where they are in their process with you, their life cycle stage, and just as importantly, letting both the human and the technology side be aware of behaviors that are going on, behavioral triggers that you want to respond to. In terms of behavioral triggers, you might be looking for a website revisit, a form submission. They've attended a webinar like this. They've opened an email. They visited a strategically important page on your website. And many companies, when a known lead that's sitting in your CRM that maybe is converted on an ebook or a webinar in the past revisits a website and hits a strategically important page, literally alarm bells go off with the sales team. Slack messages, emails, text messages, and especially when it's a named account or a nearly perfect match on your ideal client profile. For those that are very high fit but not yet showing signs of interest, email still is a really important way of nurturing leads. But it's important to remember that the customer is now in control. Your prospects will call the shots for when and how they interact with your sales team. And there's not a lot that you can do about that except for understanding that really early on, they're looking for help. They're looking for education. They're looking for people to help them figure out how to do their job better, how their company can achieve their goals, close their gaps, deal with the stressors, deal with the struggles and the challenges. And the better job you can do at helping them to see that new reality and understand how other companies and other individuals in similar roles and similar companies have persevered through these. Again, put on the hat of teacher, professor, counselor, consultants. Think more like a big four consultants, $1,000 an hour consultants, like from PwC or Deloitte or EY or KPMG. That's the experience that your prospects are looking for. And in order to do that the right way, you and your team, your whole sales enablement approach needs to get the segmentation right. You need to be super careful with the cold emails to make sure that you're not destroying your email sender reputation that you need for more effective nurturing. Practicing good email list hygiene, making sure that you eliminate duplicate systems or at least have really good integration so you're not sending silly messages that don't make a lot of sense. In terms of creating email marketing content that helps you nurture leads at scale, when you're sleeping, when there's no one available to be able to cover these interactions at what some people would feel are just insane times, like, again, 2 o'clock in the morning, their local time, or 2 o'clock on a holiday afternoon when no one's around, you need to apply what you've learned from all the qualitative research from your buyer personas every time you do a webinar, every time you have an interaction, for each kind of future buyer, so that you have content that is 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of them, so you can own as many of those touch points, as 28 touch points as possible between complete stranger and purchase decisions. So think about with your email what kinds of messages that you can create that proactively feed these to the right people at the right time to get them to move to the next step ahead that typically makes sense for that kind of buyer and that kind of company. In order to make this run without human interaction, automation becomes a really important way to deliver these timely educational resources. So there's marketing automation, there's sales automation, there's also customer success automation. We're not going to deal with customer success or account management today. That would be a whole separate webinar, as would channel management type of issues, which can also benefit a lot from marketing and sales automation. We're primarily talking about the conventional marketing and sales automation that you'd have to take a complete stranger, convert them into a known lead, educate, build trust, nurture, accelerate them to a sales opportunity, and get more of those opportunities to close new clients sooner rather than later. So in terms of the marketing automation, successful nurturing requires that you have great content that is the opposite of selfish, that's super helpful, that's super insightful, that helps your prospects do their job better. And you'll need technology tools to be able to deliver these to the right people in the right places at the right time. Workflows will help you define and describe the specific actions that you want to accomplish with your automation. Some great use cases for marketing automation, your workflows could be, for example, someone registers for a webinar and we're asking, who else should be at this? Who else should attend this? Who else should watch this? And if you registered for this webinar, chances are you've experienced exactly that. And it's funny, when I do consultations, this kind of marketing automation has existed for literally like 20 years. And you'd be shocked how often people overlook this, and you'd be amazed at how powerful that single thing can be to get more people on the decision committee attending your webinars, watching your webinar recordings, downloading your ebooks, whatever conversion event that you want to accelerate and build trust, educate and build trust with at scale with multiple stakeholders within that company. It's great for accelerating inbound leads from awareness to consideration to decision. And it's also a fantastic tool for keeping internal stakeholders on your team aware of what's going on. In terms of sales automation sequences, Again, the terminology typically is sequences on the sales side, workflows on the marketing side. What should you be thinking about? Typically, sales teams use sequences for outbound prospecting, like they'll have a series of pre-scheduled emails. The goal is typically to get a prospect to book a meeting, but you're going to have to work a lot harder than you used to provide enough promised value to get someone to book a meeting. To just beg someone for attention, hey, pretty please, can we come in and give you our pitch? We want to book a demo. Like, that's not going to cut it anymore. The buyer is in the driver's seat. It's a self-propelled buyer's journey, so we need to step it up. But again, this is how sales sequences are often used. Should you be using them this exact way? Of course not. That's why you're attending this webinar, so you can get a handle on the best practices to close more sales with your leads more effectively. Sequences can and should be also self-terminating when your prospects take a certain action. For example, if they book a meeting on your calendar, for example, in HubSpot sales, that can stop the sequence from happening. If they reply to an email message, the same thing. You don't want this automated sequence to keep going when you've got exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for a response from that person. And of course, the least desirable outcome is that they click the unsubscribe link. But we all know in sales, the best answer is yes. The second best answer is no, not maybe, right? So if they're going to leave, let them leave the right way without damaging your email sender reputation. But obviously, we want to provide so much value that they want to stay forever, and they want, because they're getting so much, they're learning so much from hanging out with us. And that's the key thing, is that we need to change the positioning. So instead of feeling like we're begging for attention and we're having to use all this manipulative language, selfish language in our messaging to get time on their calendar, we want to provide so much value that they are looking forward to visiting with us and hanging out with us. So sequences can be used for event follow-ups from meetings, rescheduled meetings, like accompanying an outbound voicemail to more than double the likelihood that you'll get a response, product demo requests, re-engagement, and recent conversions. Any discussion about closing sales faster with your existing leads would be completely remiss if we didn't talk about some basic productivity tools that eliminate some of the most common friction points. So when it comes to your CRM, anything you can do with your CRM that helps your team respond faster helps deals get closed faster. So if you're sitting and watching over the shoulder of someone from your sales team and you observe that they currently have an action that takes on average 13 minutes, we need to figure out a way to get that way down from 13 minutes down to 2 or 3 minutes or less. And why is that so important? Because if that action is repeated 10, 20 times a day, 5 days a week, oh my gosh, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of opportunity to work more efficiently. So what are some of the CRM tools that help you typically work more efficiently, get more productivity from your sales team? Nothing earth-shatteringly here, but templates are a phenomenally powerful way to take the top 10 or 20 questions that your sales reps get all the time and make it super easy for them to respond into a minute or two instead of having to spend 13 minutes handcrafting a message every time. Snippets are typically like a piece of a email that can be used to snap into an email or live chat. Tasks are a great way to make sure that everything is in one place in the CRM, so they don't have a Google Calendar that looks like a disaster area or Post-it notes all over the place. Self-booked meetings are a tremendously powerful way to save a ton of time and eliminate a lot of frustration back and forth with prospects. Be shocked how even in this day and age, that even though this technology has been around for more than 5 years, been totally affordable for more than 5 years, probably closer to 10 years at this point, not every sales team has deployed self-booked meetings on their website. So if you don't have something like that in place, for sure, get that in place in the next couple of weeks. Engagement tracking, lead scoring, help you prioritize your efforts, and automating anything that you do with logging of emails, logging of videos, logging of voicemails, logging of messages. Anything you can do that automatically logs cuts a tremendous amount of friction out of the process and will give your sales team more time back to do what they need to do most often, selling.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
In terms of strategy number 5 for closing sales faster with data center leads, let's talk about webinar and events programs and how they can educate and build trust at scale. Very meta that we're talking about this at a webinar, but I'd encourage you to consider events as a proven way to demonstrate your thought leadership while you educate and build trust at scale. They can be a dramatically powerful sales accelerator. However, here's the big however. In order for you to make those events more impactful, more effective, especially if this is a relatively new initiative, each webinar should be for one specific buyer persona at one specific life cycle or journey stage. There's a big difference between the content that you'll cover at an awareness or consideration stage webinar versus the decision stage webinar. And if you want to see a great example of this done in practice, even in a relatively small company, just observe what we do with DCSMI with awareness and consideration and decision stage webinars. So in terms of planning your webinar programs, your buyer persona research should tell you what your audience wants to learn. It'll also help give you ideas on how to reach your target audience. It will also inform ideas on who your speakers should be. Ideally, it should include a lot of your internal subject matter experts because you're trying to get your audience to fall in love with your content and by extension, fall in love with your brand and ensure that you stay with them throughout the full buyer's journey, earn a place on the short list. And when you do it really, really well, you might effectively neutralize every other competitive option on the short list to the point where they get the decision stage and you've won already. And obviously, too, this will help you with timing, the best date and time to schedule. Some tools for your webinar. For sure, you're going to want to have a marketing automation platform. You want to have a webinar hosting platform. In terms of the content, because the content's incredibly important, just having the tools alone is not going to do it. I encourage you to put your webinar program through the filter of what I call conference grade content. There should be a minimum of 4 levels of quality control that go into this. Imagine that you want to speak at a highly desirable industry conference. So 6, 8, 10 months out, you submit your proposed title and abstract summary to the conference producer. And they look at it, they give it to their advisory council, and they say, this title looks pretty good. Their bio looks pretty good. That sounds good. We're going to put them on the program. We're going to put them on the website. The next thing is about 6 or 8 weeks before the actual event, the advisory council wants to see your slide deck. Why? They want to make sure you're delivering great value and that you're not going to do a 30-minute infomercial in front of their audience. So you send in your slides, they look at it like, this looks pretty good. I think the audience is going to get a lot of value. The next test, actual day of the conference, attendees are asked to report any misbehaving speakers who are too pitchy, too self-promotional. They can do that right in the app. And every attendee gets a vote in the mobile app at the end to give you a grade or your report card on how you do. And obviously too, if the room is set for 100 people and there's 90 people in the room at the beginning of the session, you want to see most of those 90 people stay through the whole session. So there's a lot of different filters that you should be thinking about when you build your webinar. And obviously with your webinar, average session time that you can measure, that's super important. Your poll participation rate, polling questions, and your survey participation overall rating with that. Group demos are another very often overlooked event strategy for sales cycle acceleration. And don't sleep on this one, despite the fact that this is coming in near the end of our webinar today, because if you have a lot of leads and a lot of sales opportunities that haven't gotten over the finish line, group webinars could be exactly what you need. It can be a really dramatic way to accelerate your sales cycles. How do these work? These are usually scheduled to warm up leads from sales opportunities by showcasing your products and services. A good way to think about this is your group demo should largely use the same kind of format that you'd use in a one-on-one demo or a small team demo with people from the same company. Why do people attend group demos? Because they don't want to go through your sales process. They don't want to be qualified. They don't want to be put on the spot, but they are still super curious about what it is that you do. And a good way to think about this is imagine, there's 3 big reasons that people go to conferences: to learn, to network, and check out what the vendors have to offer. And we know checking out what the vendors have to offer is always at the bottom of the list. It's always number 3. That's the reason why people have to be bribed with open bars and great hors d'oeuvres and everything to get them to hang out among the booths. But here's the thing. Imagine you're doing a demo every 15 minutes on the hour, and you have your headset mic on, and you have 2 or 3 people that are in an arm's length or two of watching up on the screen, right by your product manager or sales manager, whoever is doing the demo. But you also notice about 20 or 30 feet away, just at the outer edge of where the carpet ends in your booth, there's someone else who's watching intently. And you notice that that person takes out their phone. And what you don't realize is they just slack their boss, who's about 100 feet away, 4 or 5 booths over, and says, dude, you got to get over to this booth and check this out. What you just witnessed is exactly the same reason why somebody would love your group demo, because you have no idea who that prospect is. You have no idea who that person's boss is. But wow, did they just accelerate? They didn't want to be put on your sales process. They didn't want a badge scan, but they want to come check out what you're doing. And they are really, really intrigued. Live streams and live podcasts are another great way to educate and build trust at scale. Some podcasters will record episodes as live streams. Traditional podcasts are pre-recorded, edited, and released at a later date. But live streams, is if you watch DCSMI, we do this as well, are a great way to educate and build trust with dozens or hundreds at a time. Offline events, you can actually turn your webinars into offline webinars. How does this work? It's also great for sales cycle acceleration, where you focus on a single buyer persona, set a SMART goal, and focus on a single buyer's journey stage. So you can take your webinars offline and on the road through breakfast seminars, lunch and learn events, networking receptions. If you're hosting your own events and you already have an engaged list and you don't need to spend money on advertising or acquisition, especially if you have your own facility, breakfast seminars and lunch and learns can be an exceptionally cost-effective way to educate and build trust at scale with the right audience. Your slides are displayed on a large screen, could be on a projector and on a large TV or something in your conference room or in your space, or certainly could go to restaurants or hotels or co-working, whatever works best for you. But yeah, offline events, which are basically like an offline version of a webinar, can be really, really powerful to help you deepen relationships with your early stage leads and accelerate your leads into late stage sales opportunities. Obviously, each of these different formats have their pros and cons, but there's no reason why most of the people watching this webinar shouldn't be able to deploy a lot of this to result in pretty dramatic sales acceleration. So we've talked about how to provide an excellent prospect experience while prioritizing growth goals, how to segment and personalize based on prospect actions, some basic automations to deliver timely educational resources. We gave you a very, very brief overview of some sales productivity tools to help your sales team actually spend more of their day selling and less of their time doing administrative stuff. And then we were just talking about the transformative power of webinars and events to educate and build trust at scale. But it's also extremely important to recognize that your prospects and clients have changed how they research and make purchase decisions. We've talked at length about how 83% of a typical buyer's journey is now over before people are willing to talk with someone from your sales team. And this isn't just edge cases. This is pretty much everyone. 70 to 80% of buyers now prefer this experience. However, unfortunately, most firms in and around the data center industry are completely unprepared to confront this once-in-a-generation change in purchasing behavior. Many are still really living in the past, spending most of their sales development, business development time, even account executives, spending a lot of time on LinkedIn begging for 15-minute meetings to do a pitch. Remember, your best prospects are researching and purchasing in a self-directed fashion. They're asking questions on search and Copilot and social of their peers, their contacts. They're watching tons of streams or going to review websites, listening to podcasts, attending webinars. So the question is, how can we make sure that our company has a good presence in here? Because these challenges also provide a lot of great opportunities if you're successful in positioning you and your team as subject matter experts, teachers, trusted advisors, and thought leaders. So if you have any questions on anything we talked about today, feel free to drop those into the chat pane or comment, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. But as promised, now I'm going to switch over, take a quick pause here and take a look at the comments and questions that have come in and try to answer as many of those as possible, alternating between the questions that were sent in ahead of time and the questions that were raised in the chat pane. Brilliant. Thank you. Will this webinar be recorded? Yes, everyone that is registered for this webinar will get the recording. I know I went through a lot of material at a very fast rate at a very fast clip. So yeah, for sure, the webinar recording will be available to anyone that registered on our website for this webinar. And not only is it great for you to watch it again if you want to review some of the points that were covered, but I'd also encourage you to use this as an alignment tool with others on your team that should have actually been here but weren't here. We know it takes a village. Sales is not going to be successful without really good coordination from your marketing team and customer success counterparts and probably product counterparts and executive sponsors. So yeah, for sure, feel free to use that recording to forward around to others on your team that can benefit as well. From a colo company, supplier, generator, set ports, joining from, okay, great. Okay, so the first question up that we're going to address is, how do we get customers to become aware of your products that you have available? And I think they probably meant, how do they get prospects? How do they get future customers aware of your products that are available? I think the most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to creating awareness of your products and services is that early on in that first 83% of the buyer's journey, your prospects are really not very interested in your products and services. They're interested in their problems. They're interested in their goals. And in order for you to build an effective relationship with people throughout the full buyer's journey, you need to show up where they are. Not where you'd like them to be in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but where they actually are right now. And showing up to where they are right now is they're in the awareness stage. They have goals they're trying to figure out. They have challenges they're trying to address. And they're looking for help. They're looking for education. They're looking for resources to help them to do that. So this is where you take off your sales hat and you put on your teacher or your professor hat. It's super important. It's a really important context shift in order to be able to educate and build trust with the right people. Remember, in a typical sales journey scenario, buyer's journey scenario, only 5 or 10% of a given market is ready for a sales conversation at any given time. The other 95% could be a great fit a couple of weeks or a couple of months from now. But if you're too aggressive, if you act like a car salesperson, you're going to turn them off and burn a lot of goodwill. So it's really important to have enormous empathy for their goals and challenges that you identified in their buyer persona and figure out a way that you can add value to that. When you do that, you'll earn the ability to be invited in when they're ready. You'll earn tremendous amount of loyalty. They fall in love with your content. They fall in love with your events. And by extension, that transfers into how they feel about your brand. And that breeds a tremendous amount of loyalty. It pretty much ensures that you're on the short list, you're in the consideration set. And when you do this exceptionally well, in some situations, you may end up being the entire short list, meaning that phenomenal content, tremendously remarkable event content, educational experiences can, in many cases, completely neutralize the competitor. So they end up at the decision stage when they're ready to learn about your products and services. And you've actually already won. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, with being able to close sales faster by being a lot more aware of the new, more recent ways that people now research and make their decisions in the space. Next question is, how do we find the right contact? Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So many, and it's usually, I also hear versions of this of, how do I get to the decision maker? The reality is, getting to the decision maker is not the whole story anymore. It doesn't solve the whole problem. Why? Because even if you have a warm introduction to a CTO or a CEO or a CFO or whoever your primary person is, even the C-level executives, everyone's become so much more risk averse in the last couple of years, so much more skeptical, so much more cynical, especially if you're selling to highly technical IT people. They're going to kick it back to their team. So your goal is to use your educational content, your events, your experiences to get one person, get the internal champion first interested in a lot of what you're going to help them with by providing this content that's exceptionally relevant to who they are and what they're doing, is that whole little email marketing strategy that I talked about a few minutes ago, with the who else at your company needs to watch, who else at your company needs to attend this, who else needs to read this. It takes a village to get your hands around SOC or sustainability or heat reuse or whatever, and you name the typical roles that are involved in those kinds of initiatives. So with that in mind, who else from your team could also benefit from reading our ebook or attending this webinar or attending this event? And you'd be surprised, and you have 10 of the right people. You ask this question at least 1 or 2 times out of 10, you're getting someone that's starting to spread that around. And you'll know because you start to see multiple people from the same company that are converting on the same landing page. And you're like, cool, I got 4 or 5 people from the same company, likely at least a few of them working together, talking about your company. So by the time you're invited in at the decision stage, the know, like, and trust is already off the charts. When this is done exceptionally well and the decks are stacked in your favor, you walk into that first meeting and they're quoting you. They're using your methodology as the way that they evaluate all of the other alternatives that are in the marketplace. So when it comes to decision makers, that's how you get to decision makers, that you create this content that gives someone the comfort level to share this with their peers, because they're not formally recommending your company yet. They're just saying that, hey, this looks like it could be really helpful. And of course, it's free and it's low risk on their part. That's how you're getting to the decision makers, because they're spreading this around. You're getting consensus, and all of this is resulting in dramatic sales cycle acceleration. And take a look at time. Yeah, we're a little bit over, so I will take one more question. This one looks pretty good. What are your thoughts on investing in trade shows as opposed to website content? That's a phenomenal one. So my thoughts on investing in trade shows, conferences, is probably especially data center related conferences as opposed to website content. As I mentioned earlier, there's 28 touch points typically between complete stranger and purchase decision. You don't get double or triple credit just because you spend an obscene investment going to a conference. And you can have very modest investments if it's a local conference where nobody needs to fly anywhere or have hotels or have a big travel and an entertainment budget. That can be a very modest expense. However, if you're looking at flying multiple members from your team a very long distance and having flights and Ubers and expensive hotels and lots of travel and entertainment, it can really add up fast. But just understand, you can have the most amazing sponsored cabana party in Vegas or an amazing golf tournament sponsored at this event, and that still only counts as one of the 28 touch points. So can you sustain those kinds of investments 27 more times? For nearly all companies, the answer is likely no, unless you have an outrageously high deal that you're trying to close, like a multi-7-figure deal, multi-million-dollar deal that you're trying to close. For everyone else that's probably trying to close deals that are in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or maybe even considerably less than that, you got to be really aware of your unit economics. So that's my general thoughts on how to approach what's cost effective versus what's not effective, where you're more likely to get return on investment and less likely to get return on investment. And I will also tell you that when it comes to placing your bets, making your investments on which conferences to invest in at a pinky toe level versus jumping in the whole pool, before you jump in the whole pool, really carefully look at their media kit and look at their demographics of who attended last year and who do they anticipate is going to attend this year. Now, bear in mind that the demographics from last year and who they anticipate will attend this year is for sure not going to be subject to like audit level scrutiny. It's not like they hired Deloitte or KPMG to go in there and audit their registrations from last year and give a certified statement that this was. But if they're not at least in the ballpark of matching up with your primary and secondary buyer persona, if they're not at least in the ballpark of lining up with your ideal client profile, and based on their marketing materials, you only think that maybe 10 or 15% of attendees are a good match for your company, again, this is how you decide where to place your bets. What are you going to choose to invest in? Are you going to make a tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of currency bet on a single event where it's all coming down to a couple of hours? Or are you looking to make much smaller events that can have a shelf life with not just now, but for months and years in the future? Web content, we have videos and blogs and webinars on our site that we did back 10 years ago. And even with minimal promotion, still continue to bring in visitors and leads and sales opportunities. Imagine what they could get if we actually went about building more inbound links or doing more social promotion or more email promotion or paid reach around there. So I don't think it's inherently an either or. It should be a both. But I caution you to make sure that you're able to spread your budget around in areas that make the most sense for your ideal client profile and your prioritized buyer personas. I think there's a lot of people that jump headfirst in some really large conference investments without taking a few minutes to look at the prospectus, the media kit, and looking at last year or projected this year compared to how they match up with yours. Granted, however, I think your own events, if you have your own facility, if you have your own conference room or space where you can invite prospects from your local area in, and basically the rent is free, and if assuming you have a really good email list, you don't have much expense there, obviously. And even if you are having a breakfast seminar or lunch and learn, you're just paying some minimal amounts for some in-house catering or something, like those can be phenomenal. Where it gets really, really expensive is when you're flying several people from your team and having all of the travel expenses and the sponsorship expenses and the travel and entertainment. Just be careful to make sure when you're placing really large bets that you've thought through how well of a match their demographics are compared to your target audience. So that looks like just about all the time that we have for today. I am so glad that you were able to join us today to talk all about 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. If you have any questions that we didn't get time to address today or any follow-up questions, you can feel free to respond to most of the registration and confirmation emails from today's event. That goes to someone from our team. You can also feel free to visit our website, DCSMI.com. And in the bottom right-hand corner of most pages, you'll see a live chat button where you can interact with a member from our team as well. But again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. I'm thrilled that you were able to join us today, and I wish you great success in growing your data center related business. Take care now and enjoy the rest of your day.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.